From the nation's capital to the Sunshine State.
It's compelling.
The high plains of Kansas and the northeast corner of the land of enchantment.
It's Friday.
The land of EWTN all across the Lone Star State.
It's GRN Alive.
Bringing you faith, fun, and facts.
Live from the studios of the Guadalupe Radio Network.
Join us on the show. Call
877-757-9424.
877-757-9424.
And it is, in fact, Friday. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining and making this part of your Friday morning. Don't you love the way she says that? It's Friday, and we get to celebrate not only a great feast day today, but heading into an awesome solemnity this Sunday. We're going to talk about that in the show today. This is the Friday GRN Alive program here on the Guadalupe Radio Network, and we do it twice a week. Monday is from Houston with Joe and Tim and Tito and Teresa and the crew and David, and they just got a big crew. But our crew is getting bigger. I'll tell you about that. It just we got to keep up with Houston here, right? Anyways, my name is Dave Palmer, host of the program, and Dr. Chris Malloy from the University of Dallas, great theology professor, always joins us on Fridays as well. Sissel Anderson does a lot. News, runs the board, answers phones, and then we had a prayer answered. I got an email earlier this week from a college student named Daniel D'Amore, and he said he's studying broadcasting. He's into apologetics. He wants to work at a radio station. I said, when can you start? So he's here this morning, and he's training, and he's going to be answering phones. And we're going to get him on the air one of these days because he sounds a lot like Trent Horn. But anyways, I'm not going to put him on the air today.
It's so timely because after listening to the Monday show, and I remember Joe was thanking everyone who helps out with the Monday show, and I was like, they have a very big crew.
I know.
I was like, we're looking kind of weak.
Ours is getting bigger. We need more people. So Daniel, welcome, and glad we're here. I think if we threw him on the air today, he'd probably never come back. He's like, too much. But
I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure you threw me on the air within the first day.
But you kept coming back, didn't you? Also, Diane Xavier is here, and she handles all of our social media. Some exciting news about social media, thanks to Joe McLean, who's just like the master of social media. Today we're broadcasting not only on Facebook Live, but of course all of our radio stations. That's the most important, 30 or so radio stations across the Guadalupe Radio Network. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Are there any other platforms that we could get on? Or
I'm sure there are, but that's probably good for now.
If there are any, then Joe's going to find them, and he's going to get us up there. So anyways, Diane does a great job putting all the images and us up on Facebook, so you can check that out. Facebook.com/GRN Online, and that's the same at GRN Online on Twitter and YouTube and all these other platforms. So great to have you here with us. Our phone number is 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424. Daniel's going to be answering phone calls today, and I said, I hope we get some calls, so keep him busy. We want him to have a good first day. Today is also the feast day of Saint Cecilia, 2nd and 3rd century saint, patroness of musicians, one of 7 women, including the Blessed Virgin Mary, who is commemorated by name in the canon of the Mass in the Roman Catholic Church. And she is, we ask her intercession today. So great saint, and all the musicians out there certainly rely on her for intercession. And this coming Sunday, we celebrate the solemnity of our Lord Jesus Christ, King of the universe. You know, normally we just say Christ the King, but King of the universe. And Dr. Malloy is going to be sharing some information about this special solemnity, what it means, not only to the church, but to us individually. Is Christ the King of our universe? That's what I want to, reflect on during this hour. And also, we have a couple of stories in the news that I want to connect to that. And one of them is this whole Pachamama debate, what brought it up is that I was invited to an event that was hosted by Dr. Taylor Marshall last Saturday in downtown Fort Worth, where the gentleman who's being referred to as the Pachamama dunker, Alexander Tschugguel is his name. He's from Austria, and he was invited to Texas by Dr. Taylor Marshall, and they're having a little event where people can come and meet him. And you may agree with what he did or disagree with what he did, but I was curious to go out there, and I asked Dr. Marshall, can I ask him a few questions? Can I interview him? And he said, yeah, sure. So I had a chance to interview Alexander Tschugguel, the Austrian guy who, took the Pachamama idols out of the church and tossed them in
The 6'8" guy.
Yeah.
Very tall.
Diane will put a picture up on Facebook of me interviewing him.
Oh, good.
And I look like his son.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like 30 years older than this guy, but I'm like, reaching up to get, he's huge.
Where's the NBA?
Yeah, he's huge. But and I asked him some tough questions. Why videotape it? There's one thing doing it. Why do you need to videotape it? You'll hear the answer to that. A lot of people say, well, why'd you throw it in the river? They can just go retrieve them. Why not burn them? So I asked him those questions. We'll play that. And we also like to know your thoughts, because I think good people can disagree on this, on whether what he did was right or wrong. So we'll play that interview. And then the other thing is the Chick-Fil-A decision this week. I personally was really, really disturbed by this news, because Christians have been really, really rallying behind Chick-fil-A, and they're the number 2 or 3 fast food restaurant in the country. And they make a decision now to basically throw Christian organizations under the bus, like Salvation Army and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And
there seems no financial motive for it either.
I know. And who does this inspire? I mean, it's not like the liberals are all of a sudden going to say, oh, gosh, we love Chick-fil-A. They still hate Chick-fil-A. Mm-hmm. Now all they've done is ticked off their base. And I just wanted, and Sissel has done some research on this, and she's going to lead a discussion later on in the show. We want your thoughts as well. I just want to let you know what kind of fired off this controversy back in 2012. The CEO of Chick-fil-A, Dan Cathy, was interviewed on a radio show called the Ken Coleman Show. Listen to this quote of what Dan Cathy, this is what got him in the mess in the first place. Mm-hmm. I think a good holy mess, all tied into Christ the King, because I think that according to this quote, Jesus Christ is the king of Dan Cathy's universe. Listen to what he said back in 2012. Quote, I think we are inviting God's judgment on our nation when we shake our fist at him and say, we know better than you as to what constitutes a marriage. I pray God's mercy on our generation that has such a prideful, arrogant attitude to think that we have the audacity to define marriage and what it is all about. End quote. Dan Cathy.
That's remarkable.
2012. I got another quote from him as well. Now, what do they do now? They capitulate. And for what? For money? I mean, how much money does this guy need to make?
Well, notice also that he said to define marriage. That actually that's a very Catholic sensibility he's got, because, you can take Russell Hittinger, a great philosopher, has talked about this. Let's say the definition is correct, but one man, one woman, but actually the state doesn't have the authority to define it. This is a natural institution by God. Right, so the state needs to recognize it, not define it.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
We want your thoughts on it, because we're going to devote a whole 10-minute segment to this. And Sissel did some research. Her brother was researching it, and so Sissel's going to bring some additional news on that as well. Again, the phone number, 877-757-9424. And there is some exciting news that came out this week. Bishop Daniel Jenke of Peoria, Illinois, announced on Monday that Archbishop Fulton Sheen is going to be beatified December 21st at the Cathedral of St. Mary of the Immaculate Conception in Peoria. That is the exact same church where 100 years ago Archbishop Fulton Sheen was ordained a priest.
Oh, wow.
And
Amazing.
so it's very symbolic.
So cool.
And I was looking for somebody to talk about this, and I was running into dead ends, and all of a sudden I got a call from my friend Bill Howard, who works with Christopher West, and he said, hey, my brother, Dr. Peter Howard, is an expert on Sheen. Do you need anybody to talk about this? In like 10 seconds, I said, yes, I do. And so Dr. Peter Howard, the founder of the Fulton Sheen Institute, is going to join us in the final segment of the show to discuss this exciting news. He's an expert on the Mariology of Fulton Sheen. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. And just one other news before we go to Sissel for her news. 6 days from now, we celebrate Thanksgiving. 11 days from now, the beginning of our GRN Christmas Share-a-thon. The theme is Treasure in Heaven. And so we ask you to please support the Guadalupe Radio Network. And don't forget, Monday, Joe and the gang will have a live GRN Alive from Houston. And so a lot of exciting stuff going on here at the Guadalupe Radio Network. And we got a fun show today. Please plan to join us in the conversation. We want to hear what you have to say. 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424. And with no further ado, we'll go to Sissel Anderson with a look at the news. Hi, Sissel.
Thanks, Dave. Yesterday was the 5th day of the Trump impeachment hearings. Fiona Hill was a former top Russian expert for the White House, and David Holmes, a senior diplomat at the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine, testified in a joint hearing before the House Intelligence Committee. Part of Hill's testimony included that the idea of Ukraine interference in the 2016 campaign is a fictional narrative that was perpetrated and propagated by Russia. Voting on the impeachment could potentially take place before Christmas. The United Methodist Church, one of the larger Protestant denominations, may be headed towards a split. After years of debating, global Methodist leaders voted against LGBTQ rights. However, recently, 5 bishops representing the Western jurisdiction of the UMC released a statement expressing support of LGBTQ clergy. Now, church leaders are debating whether to fracture into 2 organizations, one liberal and one conservative, before the denomination's next annual gathering in 2020. It's Turkey Day next week, and that means many more Americans will be on the road than usual. In fact, more than 55 million travelers are planning trips that are more than 50 miles away from their home this Thanksgiving. This will be the second highest travel volume recorded for the holiday since 2005. With lots of families on the road and in the air, take the time this next week to pray for St. Christopher's intercession for safe travels for all. With the news, this is Sissel Anderson.
And thank you so much, Sissel. And you know what we're going to do? We are going to take a quick break, okay? And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the solemnity of Christ the King, the King of the universe, okay? Is he the King of your personal universe? Is he the King of our universe as a nation? Well, we'll talk about that. Chris Malloy is going to tell us more about the significance of this incredible solemnity that we're going to celebrate on Sunday. So quick break, and we'll be right back with GRN Alive.
In 2 weeks, we will be interrupting our regular programming schedule for a quarterly share-a-thon to keep your GRN station on the air. Why do we come to our listening family to seek financial gifts? The Guadalupe Radio Network spends approximately $4.5 million per year to operate all 37 stations in the network, or about $515 per hour. We are 100% listener supported, completely dependent on the divine providence of God working through the generosity of our GRN family of listeners. We are so thankful that you are part of the GRN family. I want to personally thank you for your continued prayerful and financial support since the year 2000, when the GRN first started in Catholic radio. This is Len Oswald, president of the Guadalupe Radio Network, with your GRN Family Minute. We are your Catholic radio. Radio for your soul.
Have you ever wondered how it would be possible to make your cup of coffee an even greater joy? Coffee of the Cross brings you great coffee for a great cause. We roast on Mondays and ship on Wednesdays direct to you from Nicaragua. All proceeds go to fund the Mountain of Peace Shrine, inspired by St. John Paul II, where thousands of people come on pilgrimage to pray for peace and consecrate themselves to Our Lady. Coffee of the Cross is a non-profit project of the Diocese of Matagalpa with the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. Fill your cup with Coffee of the Cross, knowing that you are employing families and conserving a natural treasure, the Mountain of Peace Shrine. Please visit coffeeofthecross.com for more information and to purchase your coffee today. That website again is coffeeofthecross.com.
And we are back, and this is GRN Alive Friday edition here on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Our phone number, 877-757-9424, broadcasting across the entire English language Guadalupe Radio Network, Facebook.com, Twitter and YouTube as well today. So we invite you to check out those platforms if you're able to. Dave Palmer, Sissel Anderson, Dr. Chris Malloy, Diane Xavier, and our new intern, Daniel De Amore, is here as well.
You have a lot more to
so
say
we
these
are
days.
expanding. Yeah, I know. And so anyways, we are getting very close to Advent. This Sunday is the final Sunday of Ordinary Time. The church celebrates the solemnity of Christ the King, instituted in 1925 by Pope Pius XI. And that's all I know about it. Otherwise, we go to our expert theologian on the show, Dr. Chris Malloy. How you doing, Chris?
Great.
Good morning.
Good to be here. Thank you.
All right, so
This is a great doctrine.
Yeah.
You know? So this is not only a feast, a liturgical feast, but a doctrine, and it was inaugurated. The feast was inaugurated by, as you said, Pius XI, in the year 1925 with his encyclical Quas Primas. By the way, for readers, go ahead and look it up. It's great encyclical, Quas with a Q, Primas, all right? So the idea is that, at the end of Matthew, our Lord says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the church takes that very seriously. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. So that means that right now, Christ really is King of the universe. Right now, not just at the end of the time, but right now. And now, what does that mean for us? That means that I, as an individual, have a duty to recognize that kingship. That is an objective duty, right? So this needs to be told me. I need to discover this through the preaching of the gospel. And then I have a duty to reverence Christ as king, to acknowledge his kingship and accept it in my life. But it doesn't just mean that, me as a private individual. It also means the groups that I'm with. So, for instance, my family has the obligation to recognize and to accept the kingship of Christ. But it doesn't just stop at the family. Pius XI teaches that, and this is the constant tradition of the church, that civil society has the duty to recognize and acknowledge and accept the kingship of Christ. So this is pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Now, to be sure, this is a spiritual kingship, and Pius XI makes it very clear. Like, in the Gospel of John, like, if my kingdom were of this world, my disciples would have more than two swords to ad-lib the gospel, and they would be fighting to defend me, and I would have my angels, come down and defend me. So this is a spiritual kingship, right? Nonetheless, as Pius XI says, it has social ramifications, right? So let me just, for instance, read just one from paragraph 17. It would be a grave error to say that Christ has no authority whatever in civil affairs, since by virtue of the absolute empire over all creatures committed to him by the Father, all things are under his power, right? So there are basically, as Pius the 11th puts it, there are two kinds of errors that you could have here. There are political ramifications, right? And there are two extreme errors in terms of how we view the Catholic religion and which is, he says, the kingdom of Christ and state, okay?
Yeah.
One error is to say that they are one and the same. All right, so this is the error of theocracy, where the priests are the rulers, okay? That's an error, and the Catholic Church has rejected that error. The state has its legitimate goods, and the common good for which it properly strives, which is social order, and all this kind of thing. So it has its legitimate autonomy, it's called, right? Nonetheless, the other extreme is to say that there should be no connection between the state and religion, the true religion. There should be a separation between the state and the religion. And so what's the middle ground? The middle ground here is where the state recognizes that it is limited from above, that there is a higher common good, and that's the good for which the kingdom of Christ on which the kingdom of Christ is centered. That's the good for which the church strives, right, which is eternal salvation. And this good is related to the state's good because the natural law is darkened in our hearts and in our minds. And so even to know the truth about marriage, let's say, because we started off the show with that, even to know the truth about marriage, we in principle can do this through our reason and the natural law. But as a matter of practical, concrete reality, it's very difficult with the darkness of concupiscence and our own sinfulness and cultural bias, right? Where a whole culture swings away from the truth on one, whether it's slavery or whether it's marriage, in this time or that time, a culture can swing away from the truth. The church knows the natural law, and in fact, only the church can authentically interpret the natural law. And so the kingship of Christ helps the acknowledgement of the kingship of Christ by the civil rulers helps keep society on track. And so this, you said this encyclical was written in 1925. What happened just less than a decade before that? The First World War.
Yeah, this was in between the two world wars, wasn't it?
Yeah, so the Pope starts off and he says, these manifold evils in the world were due to the fact that the majority of men had thrust Jesus Christ and his holy law out of their lives. that these had no place either in private affairs or in politics. As long as individuals and states refused to submit to the rule of our Savior, there could be no really hopeful prospect of lasting peace among nations. So his prescription, by the way, and this is relevant to our times, for the strife among nations is the kingship of Christ, shepherded, of course, by the Catholic Church.
Yeah. What about from an individual standpoint? I mean, this is, you know, the political realm and the state and the church relationship, but do you think he had in mind the personal kingship? I know you kind of hit
that's
this
the
in
more.
The beginning. I remember growing up.
This is the one that's obvious.
My mom had a big banner in our house, and it was the quote from, I think, Joshua, and it says, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And we have that same, you know, I think even from how, when people come into our house, do they know that Christ is the king of our house? In our conversations, the way we carry ourselves, do people say, "No, this is a person who puts God, you know, God is the king of this person's life"? And I think that's also an important part of it as well.
Oh, that's absolutely. There's no question. So, in fact, the latter is the basis, really, of the expansion of the former. So, right, I mean, so in other words, societies can't recognize Christ the King unless the individuals in the societies begin to convert more and more. So this also touches on evangelization, right? We need to spread the kingship of Christ. How do we do that? We need to spread the gospel, the good news of Christ, and we need to live according to the gospel, worshiping one God, not false gods, right? The Pope says the real enemy here of the kingship of Christ is the kingdom of Satan. So that means, for me as an individual, sin is my number one enemy, right? As you rightly say, we need to convert, our hearts need to be converted to Christ. And how does he win our hearts? Through this death on a cross. So again, it's not, he doesn't use military means to spread his kingdom, but nonetheless, the church has recognized the importance and the utility of when society is properly ordered, then the society can actually defend the good of the church against hostile attacks.
Yeah, let's talk about a couple of the stories in the news that I think tie into this solemnity that we celebrate on Sunday, Christ the King. Is Christ the King of our lives? Are we willing to go out on a limb and prove that? Like I said, in small ways and in big. And I wanted to bring in a little conversation. I'd love some comments from our listeners as well about this. The Pachamama idol dunker, whose name is Alexander Tschugguel. I think I pronounced that right. He's from Austria. Tschugguel, okay.
Tschugguel.
877-757-9424. Is what he did, was that justified or not? I think he would say, hey, this is an idol, and I mean, I'm putting words in his mouth, but Christ is the king of my life, and this was an idol, and I had to do something, right? I know that's what he would say. Just as a little bit of background, and then I'm going to play a 5-minute interview that I did with him, and Diane will put a picture of me looking like I'm about 2 feet tall, standing up against this guy last Saturday when I had a chance to interview him.
How tall do you think he was?
I think about 6'8".
6'8",
yeah.
Wow.
He's huge guy.
Crazy.
Really is.
And okay, so Friday, October 4th, Pope Francis, okay, Diane put the picture up on Facebook. Friday, October 4th, Pope Francis witnessed an indigenous performance at a tree planting ceremony in the Vatican Gardens, during which people held hands and bowed before caved images of pregnant women, one of which was reported representing the Blessed Virgin Mary. Well, it came out, and even Father Mitch Pacwa came out and said, well, this image, this is the Pachamama idol, which is, worshipped at least in that particular part of the world. 1 month later, in a video uploaded on YouTube, Alexander Tschugguel, a young man from Austria, videotapes himself taking 5 statues from a church near the Vatican and throwing them in the Tiber River. Now, this was widely watched and widely commented upon. A lot of people celebrated, and some people weren't very happy about it. And then he put out a 5-minute video called "Why We Threw the Pachamama Idols into the Tiber River." And he described how he came to see the carved images in Santa Maria as a violation of the first commandment, which says we can have no God besides the one God, right? So last weekend, as I mentioned, got out to this meet and greet, had a chance to meet him, shake his hand, and say hello to him, and interview him. And so I think I asked him some pretty good questions. And listen to this, and then we'll have a little discussion afterwards. And we'd love to hear from you. What do you think about this? Is this...
What's the number so that people can call in?
877-757-9424. 877-757-9424.
Dr. Malloy has been made for this radio. He's got it down.
He should be on the Share-a-thons. Okay, say the number. Say the phone number. Also, I'm outside on a patio. There's ambient noise, but there's going to be a lot of ambient noise, but you can definitely hear his answers and my questions. So here's my interview with the Pachamama idol dunker.
First of all, just what brings you to Dallas? So why are you here to this weekend?
I got invited by a Texan friend of mine, Dr. Taylor Marshall, and he told me I should visit him because Texas is the heart of America. And I thought, let's go there. Yesterday I had a wonderful Willie Nelson concert, and today we had this meet and greet, and tomorrow I want to visit the Mater Dei parish, which I heard so much about. Yes, that's the reason I'm here.
The decision to do what you did, was it a difficult one? Did it come with a lot of prayer? What kind of tipped the scale to say, okay, I got to do this?
I wanted to do it earlier, 2 weeks earlier, when I was in Rome at the beginning of the Synod. I attended a few conferences there, and my wife and others told me, don't do it that way, pray over it first. So I prayed and went back to Austria, and I was really nervous, and then I thought, okay, let's forget it for a second. I continued praying about it, and then it came to my mind through a friend who told me, maybe you should do it. And then I asked the priest, and he told me I should do it. Then I asked my wife again, and she said, if the priest says yes, you have to do it now. Yeah. And I just got the ticket, went to Rome and did it. And then through all the prayers, when we started doing it, the nervosity was gone. It was really a wonderful day. So I can just encourage you, always pray before a big thing.
Yeah.
It really gives you the power.
The decision to videotape it, because obviously that makes you more culpable of being possibly being caught. Tell me about that decision.
It's a very important decision because nowadays people tend to not believe things they do not see. It is a modern thing. In the past, you could rely on a word of someone else, but nowadays you cannot rely on anyone. So if I would have just told people, I got the statues out, they would tell me, you're a liar, that's it. And second of all, I didn't want it to be about me as a person first. I wanted to do this video, so that's the reason I cut out my head everywhere. I have the footage where you can see me as a full. Maybe I'll post it online sometimes. And to make the people think of what we did and not who did it. And afterwards, because the people from the Synod tried to drop down everything and try to ignore what happens around the world, we decided to come out because the coming out gives it another push and another perspective. So that was the reason, and that's the reason we videotaped it from the first place.
Yeah. Tell me, and this last question about the response, from your family to your own country, internationally, from the church. Tell me how has the response been, and how has this impacted you personally?
The response was so wonderful. You cannot imagine that, actually. As I didn't imagine that. I got tons of mails people telling me about conversions, about all the things, and that's when I saw, okay, thank you, God, because if you do something as a human and it's good, then your life will be better maybe. But if you try to do something listening to God, then God will take this and give graces to all the world. So it was really wonderful to see that the throwing out of the Pachamamas gave graces to so many people all around the world. Within Austria, I have to admit, I was very shocked that my own people, who normally are very much against this, supported me. In my own country, many of the people they told me, he's too Catholic. Now they went to me and told me, Alexander, I have to admit, maybe it was a little bit harsh, but it was very good and so on. So I now see something, and this is a kind of turning point for all of us. Being Catholic in a modern time does not make any sense for a modern man. If you want to be Catholic, you have to understand that the whole modern world actually is something which is against your faith. So you do not have to play by the rules of the modern world. Do not try to explain people the truths of the faith using modernist philosophy, modernist explanations. Try to be Catholic through and through. Whenever the more Catholic you are, the better. Or as the Bible says, your yes should be a yes and your no should be a no. And I think this decision to do that gave the people the possibility to now say a big yes to the Catholic faith. And that's the biggest grace I actually could experience.
All right. Last question, I promise you can give a short answer. Some people have said you should have burned them. Why throw them in the Tiber? And do you wish, because obviously they've been retrieved, do you wish you had did it a different way, or was that symbolic?
No, first of all, it is symbolic because the Tiber gets out the filth of the city. It is a river, so that's his duty. Second of all, the purpose was to not have them in the church anymore. This actually fulfilled this purpose. And thirdly of all, even though they claim they fished out the statues, I heard from many different sources that this is not true, which I believe, because it is very difficult to fish out these statues. They could have fished out one, because one statue landed not in the river but next to the river on the foundation of the bridge. And when they told us that they fished out the statues, a friend of mine went to this bridge and looked down there, and the statue was still lying there. So I know that at least about this statue it's not true. But whatever, if they say they fished it out, they might fished it out. It's good, because then they cannot say any longer that I'm a thief. They can only say I vandalized something, but I didn't, because they
got it back.
Yeah, they got.
Thank you very much.
All right, there it is, my interview with Andrew Tschugguel. I think I got that right.
You said Andrew instead of Alexander, though.
Oh,
You got the
I
last
finally
name
got
right.
the last name, and now I messed up the first name, Alexander. Okay, Alexander the Austrian. All right, and so, anyways, if you have a comment on that or on Chick-Fil-A, we'll talk about it in a second. 877-757-9424. 877-757-9424. Sissel, you had some initial reservations about this in the first place, didn't you?
Yes, I did. So initially, when I first heard about it, obviously, I don't agree that this was an idol. It should not have been in the Catholic Church. I 100% behind that. I was a little hesitant, mostly on the filming of it, and then later on coming out of revealing who he was, and it seemed like a lot of attention going towards the guy and not necessarily the idol and like the purpose behind it. But after hearing his answers and stuff like that, I'm a little bit more, I understand. I'm more behind him and understand him and stuff like that. I was just a little hesitant when people started calling out like, "Oh, he's the hero," this, and I was like, "Well, okay." I'm not sure, if that was I don't know. We can't really say was that like the right or wrong thing to do, because it shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Those my initial thoughts.
Any other thoughts, Dr. Malloy?
Yeah, so I mean, this is interesting. I do think you're right. Prudence could come down differently on this.
Yeah.
One question is, did we have an obligation to do this, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're looking at it from that perspective, say on the one hand, Sissel's right here. The idols should not be in the church. This is actually a desolating sacrilege.
Yeah.
On the other hand, who has the authority to remove them? I guess that's the only question I have.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, when this first happened, my gut reaction was yes.
Yeah. All right. Right.
And I spoke with some friends of mine, who thought about political theory and whatnot. And they're like, they had the same exact gut reaction. Then I asked them, what do you think Aquinas would say about who has the authority to do this?
Yeah.
And they would say, wow, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Is it the bishop in charge of that church who has the duty and the authority to do that, or is it the private individual? It's just a question.
Yeah, that's a good question. We got a call that came in. This is an interesting comment. I'm just reading what's Daniel put on the board here. Vicky in Dallas has a comment aligned with this conversation. Vicky, thanks for calling. What's your comment?
David, we had a Cruzero war in Mexico. And Jose Luis Sanchez del Rio, who is a saint now, did the exact same thing.
That's awesome.
He was very upset that they were desecrating the temples, the churches, Catholic churches. They were taken over by the army, and they were letting horses and chickens and animals in, and they were not being used for the celebration of the Mass. And so he got really upset and started taking out the animals. He got arrested. He got, he's a martyr.
Yeah.
Did he get killed for that?
He was only 14 years old.
Yeah, he was the kid.
The kid.
The
movie
movie
for the greater glory. That is awesome. Wow.
And so I'm all for what was that?
That maybe that resolves the
prudence.
question.
Yeah.
To me, no prudence needed.
Yeah.
We all need to do. We need to give it all. We all need to do our share.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Vicky, thank you for the comment.
Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Holy Spirit prudence is what Vicky means.
Yeah.
That's what's needed, and not just a low, kind of citizen duty kind of prudence. And that's actually a teaching of the saints, that sometimes the Holy Spirit calls someone to act in ways that we might find quite unexpected.
And that's the first why that I asked. The first question I asked is, did this come through prayer? I wanted to know that.
That's
he
right.
said yes, and he talked to his priest. He talked to his wife. We always want to advise our question, ask our wives, right?
That's right.
All right, let's
especially when they're listening.
A little bit of time to talk about Chick-fil-A, I've already kind of expressed.
Yes,
Totally. I mean, it's a restaurant. They make a decision, but I think it's bigger than that from a cultural standpoint. I think this company totally caved. Sissel has done some research on this. Just a little bit of background. Chick-fil-A announced Monday that it has stopped funding 2 Christian charities with histories of opposing same-sex marriage. Of course, that's the language of the mainstream media. The fast food chain had faced criticism in the past for its charitable donations and the CEO Dan Cathy's public comments opposing gay marriage. And, this isn't a small amount of money either. Last year, Chick-fil-A gave the Fellowship of Christian Athletes $1.65 million with an M, and Salvation Army got $115,000. So anyway, Sissel, you've had a chance to kind of dig into this, and what's your thought?
Well, my thought, initially when the news broke, I'm always a little bit hesitant when it comes out. Everyone's very emotional. They're like, oh, this happened. I wanted to look into it a little bit more. What actually happened? Were they doing this from a place of money, from a place, or are they just simply looking at new charities? Like, what was it happening? And unfortunately, from what I found, it does appear that this was from a monetary standpoint because they've been trying to grow more into more liberal areas of the country because they're started in Georgia, a very southern Bible Belt area, and I also have been trying to go out of the country to more pro-LGBTQ, Europe, Canada places, and so they realized, and this is one of the executives told a news outlet that the growing last rounds of headlines was impossible to ignore. So it was impeding the company's growth. And so it was, unfortunately, very much from that standpoint. And then it goes back to the question of how much did they have to grow? Yeah. They're number 3 in the country for fast food. It's about greed at this point. And you got to wonder, well, when did that become more important than your values? They had such a following of people who were so dedicated. Defending them. My friends and I have always we'll choose Chick-fil-A over anything else just because we want to support that company.
I went out last night and got a Popeyes chicken sandwich.
Yeah,
you did.
Is Cathy still the CEO?
Yeah. Dan
so
Cathy.
If he's listening, and they say God or Mammon.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and when he faces Jesus, as we all will, in judgment, is Jesus going to say, by golly, you expanded to so many countries with that company. I mean, by golly, come on into my kingdom.
Oh, yeah. That's totally what's going to happen at the gates of heaven, for sure.
Or is Jesus going to recall the quote from Dan Cathy saying, and I already gave one quote, quote, we are very much supportive of the family. This is back in 2012. The biblical definition of the family union. We are a family-owned business, a family-led business, and we are married to our first wives. We give God thanks for that. We want to do anything we possibly can to strengthen families. We are very much committed to that, Cathy emphasized. We intend to stay that course, he said. We know that it might not be popular with everyone, but thank the Lord, we live in a country where we can share our values and operate on biblical principles, end quote.
And that's the thing, too, is that now that they've caved under this thing, all the smaller Christian companies that are trying to stay to their morals, they're making it that much more difficult. They showed the culture that if the culture complains and pushbacks enough, that they'll cave.
Yeah.
That's just terrible.
I like the Rod Dreher tweet is basically this is spouses and the executives in parties unwilling to stand the social pressure. Yeah, I mean this it does get personal, so they're and it also the financial motive. But here's another thing. Let's look at the opportunity. First of all, they can reverse. Dan Cathy, you can reverse this. And B, think of your position. People want Chick-fil-A. They love it, so you actually have social pressure. And who is the money or who's behind all this LGBTQ? It's actually very few people with lots of money and influence.
Right.
But as far as the people go, the people just want to live normal lives. They have a sensibility about this.
The irony is that when the first controversy erupted, it was Governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee, who organized people saying, let's all go out and eat Chick-fil-A, like Sissel was saying. And I do that with great pride, and I even want my kids to work at Chick-fil-A. At least I used to. And do you know that after the controversy, Chick-fil-A's profits rose 12% to $4.6 billion in the period immediately following the controversy. They made money through the controversy. Because the Christians were saying,
The line is around the corner.
Every Chick-fil-A you see.
Like the Green family with Hobby Lobby. I'm not a Hobby Lobby. I'm just not an arts and crafts kind of guy. But I got
I'm an arts and crafts kind of girl, and I've been Hobby Lobby a lot.
And I think they're sticking to it. I mean,
they are.
They went to battle.
And the thing is, Chick-fil-A did all that. Not being open on Sunday. They were not open on Sunday, and they're still the third in the country for the largest fast food chain, which is incredible.
And my question is why? I love that they're closed on Sunday, but at this point, is there any point for them to stay closed on Sunday? I mean,
that's a good question.
They've already abandoned their principles. So
I don't like
why
shopping
not
on
just
Sunday.
Make some more money. I mean,
I don't know. Every little material thing that's culturally Christian, I want to hold on to. So keep the Sunday. Keep the Sunday.
God bless them for doing that.
But I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
One more thing I want to say is that Salvation Army, as soon as this news broke, immediately tweeted that they wanted to note that they believe that they are one of the largest providers of poverty relief to the LGBTQ. I can never say that. Oh my
LGBTQ. They keep adding
elemental.
I know. Community, population, and so they were quite offended, but that they were told that they weren't loving and caring to every.
Yeah, and are they going to cave? Is Fellowship of Christian Athletes going to cave? I mean, it's a domino effect.
Chick-fil-A was like the biggest company that you looked up to for these things.
And all the LGBT people all of a sudden going to say, "Oh, we love Chick-fil-A now." No, they still hate them.
That's
Dr.
correct.
Malloy, I know you got to go. We got to take a break. Last thought.
Last thought. Read Quas Primas.
Okay.
Paragraph 24 states it. This is the thing. The empire of Christ over all nations was rejected. Then the right of the church to teach her subjects and legislate was rejected. That's the French Revolution. Then gradually, quote, the religion of Christ came to be likened to false religions and placed ignominiously on the same level. And then it keeps going down. So the thing is, we do have to return, starting with the individual, to the social kingship of Christ.
Amen. Great way to close out. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
See you in a couple weeks.
God bless.
Anyways, by the way, recorded show next week. It's the day after Thanksgiving.
That's
Then
right.
the following week, the Share-a-thon. So we're not going to see Dr. Chris in his bow tie for
3 weeks.
3 weeks. That's
what
all right.
will we do?
All right. Quick break. We're going to talk about the upcoming beatification of Archbishop Fulton Sheen with Dr. Peter Howard right after this.
Instead of fighting the crowds, isn't it so much easier to hop online and do your shopping in the comfort of your own home? Did you know that you can help the Guadalupe Radio Network when you shop online? All you need to do is shop on Amazon Smile and 0.5% of your purchase goes to the GRN. Just go to AmazonSmile.com and select La Promesa Foundation as your nonprofit of choice. La Promesa is the parent company of Guadalupe Radio. It's that simple to give a little extra help to the Guadalupe Radio Network.
Hey, Donnie, name 4 of the 7 sacraments.
Baptism, confession.
That's right, reconciliation.
Communion, and confirmation.
As parents, we're the primary educators of our Catholic faith to our children, and if you don't know your Catholic faith as well as you should, that's okay. Just tune in daily to the Guadalupe Radio Network by logging online to grnonline.com. The Guadalupe Radio Network. Listen, learn, love, and pass it on.
I don't know why I turned on my radio, because I've kept my radio off for years, because there's so much trash. And once I turned it on, I was absolutely hooked. I actually was gone from the Catholic Church for 35 years. I want to get to heaven. I don't know if I will. I worry about it. But I not only want to get to heaven at the moment of my death, I want to find as much heaven as possible here on earth. I love the shows with a Catholic apologist. I love the shows with the sort of day-to-day psychologist, Greg and Lisa Popchak. I love hearing not just of other people's problems who call in, but I love getting the Catholic take on how to deal with day-to-day reality. If your purpose in life is to find God, not just here, but after you die, then living out that purpose is going to color absolutely everything you do.
The Guadalupe Radio Network, radio for your soul.
And we welcome you back to GRN Alive, Friday edition on Friday. That works out well, doesn't it? 877-757-9424. The non-bow tie portion of the show continues now.
I should start investing in some bow ties.
All right. Diocese of Peoria, Illinois announced Monday that Venerable Fulton Sheen will be beatified December 21st at the city's Cathedral of St. Mary of the Immaculate Conception. Sheen had been ordained a priest of the diocese in that same cathedral on September 20th of 1919, 100 years ago. Peoria Diocese said, quote, "It seems entirely fitting that the beatification will take place at the end of this 100-year anniversary of his ordination to the priesthood." And we are honored to have joining us to talk about this exciting news Dr. Peter Howard, one of the world's leading scholars on Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen and the founder of the Fulton Sheen Institute. Dr. Howard, good morning. Thanks for being with us today.
Good morning, Dave. It's great to be with you on this beautiful Friday.
Yeah, so how did the news hit you on Monday? Were you kind of expecting this, or it's got to been exciting to receive this news this week about so one of your great heroes?
Yes, it was very exciting, but honestly, I was blindsided by it. My insiders didn't reveal anything to me, so they kept a close lip on this because once they postponed it from the fall, I figured, maybe springtime when his birthday was, early May. But then when I learned the reason why, it made a lot of sense too. And I think that's, one of the big reasons is they want to be able to have his niece, who was very pivotal in bringing his body to Peoria, to be able to attend, as she gets older. And, they want to be, they really want her to be present at that.
Yeah. Talk about the process a little bit. I always find it fascinating about how one becomes a canonized saint, and you go from venerable to blessed, and then a saint. Miracles are involved. The process itself. Can you speak on that a little bit, and what had to happen to get to this point?
Sure. Well, it all goes back really to around 2002 when the Diocese of Peoria, they took on the initiative of submitting what they call his cause, presenting an argument for why Fulton Sheen should be a saint. And so once Rome gives the approval that they can begin that process, then they just start gathering all the information of everybody who ever knew him that they can, get access to, interviews of family members, friends, contemporaries. They go through every single thing he's ever written and said. So you can imagine that task. And then they collect all this together. They send it to Rome, and then Rome summarizes it as well, and then they basically say, did this man live a life of heroic virtue and charity and other things? And if they say yes, then they declare him to be venerable. He's worthy of veneration. And then at that point, they wait for it if there's a miracle that's been submitted for somebody who's prayed to Fulton Sheen, and it goes through a rigorous process of a medical examination board, who then has to declare that the miracle really had, there was nothing that can explain it in modern science. And then they send it to a theological board in Rome, who then reviews it as well. And if all that goes through, then they send a recommendation to Pope Francis saying that there's clearly a miracle that says this man is before God in heaven and he's interceding. And so Pope Francis just has to sign it. And if he does, they set a date for beatification, and which is where we are today.
Yeah.
And then after that, they repeat the process of the miracle again for canonization.
Yeah. Phone number 877-757-9424. We're talking about the exciting news this week that Archbishop Fulton Sheen is going to be beatified December 21st, right before Christmas in Peoria, Illinois. My guest is Dr. Peter Howard, a leading scholar on Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen and also founder of the Fulton Sheen Institute. When and why did you become such a devotee of Archbishop Fulton Sheen? What is it about his life, his writings that appeals so much to you, Dr. Howard?
Well, it takes me back 20 years. I had heard of him, and I was in Dallas, Texas, so in your territory, and I just felt the call to take a retreat one weekend and then discern my call in life. And my sister said, why don't you listen to these tapes of Bishop Sheen? They changed our pastor and made him the priest that he was, and he had just died of cancer. I said, wow, that sounds interesting. I got a 3-hour drive. I'll put him on. And just that little yes to doing that radically changed my life. And so I knew that this man was going to be a big part of my future, and that really just sparked a whole nother chapter. Really, the second half of my life has all been formed directly by this great man.
Yeah, and he did so much, and it's kind of hard, even in the time that we have to do this interview now, to talk about his contribution to the church, not only in America, but he was a bishop of several dioceses, and radio host, TV host, prolific author, speaker. Amazing life that he lived. You have zeroed in somewhat as an expert on his Mariology, and I'm thinking of the book that Fulton Sheen wrote called The World's First Love, Mary, Mother of God. Speak on that a little bit. What was his particular contribution in this area of theology?
Sure. Well, I think that book is the best book on Mary I've ever read, and obviously, I've read a lot. Sheen's contribution, the more I've reflected on it, is that he has had such a penetrating insight into really what has become this message of Fatima. In other words, like how Mary is essential when it comes to the holiness of one's soul. When he was a bishop, his Episcopal motto was, "Grant that I may come to you through Mary." And that was a big key to everything that he did. He said, if you want to convert a soul, pray to Mary. And what the World's First Love, though, does, it introduces us to Mary in a way that all these other theological manuals, they don't do. If you really encounter Mary deeply in the mystery of Christ and Scripture, non-Catholics can read his works and discover the whole mystery of Christianity through the lens of Mary in a whole new way. So I think that's probably his greatest gift, is just to bring us, to connect us to Mary really as our mother in a way that we just can't find in most books.
Hi, Dr. Howard. This is Sissel. I've always been fascinated by Archbishop Fulton Sheen just simply because he seemed to just draw in people who maybe you wouldn't think that would want to listen about the Catholic faith and stuff. I know my dad, he kind of, in his teen years, he stopped practicing his faith, but he always enjoyed listening to Archbishop Fulton Sheen and his radio show. And I recently heard that Humphrey Bogart, he knew him. And why do you think he attracted so many interesting people from different walks of life?
Well, I think two reasons. One is that Fulton Sheen was such a real person. He has such a gift of connecting with people, and that was really at the heart of his own evangelization. He said it himself. He said that the way that we're going to reach people today is just speaking to their hearts, not so much to their heads. And when it came to how he evangelized, he talked about these phases. He says, in the 30s and 40s when he was on the radio, he did a lot of direct Christian doctrine teaching. But once he got on TV, his audience changed to, predominantly non-Catholics, Jewish people, Protestants. And he said, I had to find a way to start with a common denominator that everybody could understand, and then take, kind of launch from that point and take them all the way to a divine truth. So he'll start talking about aviation, and by the end of this televised broadcast on ABC, he's talking about angels. He'll talk about the happiness that man wants, and then he'll start pointing, to some of the miseries of life or the threats of communism, and all of a sudden he'll take them to how living our Christian life is the only answer that's going to provide fulfillment. And this resonated with audiences, even if they didn't quite agree with him. They all could say that they understood exactly what he meant. And those who were open to it found that, it really was a grace that changed their lives.
Yeah, speaking of the people that were impressed by him, Martin Sheen changed his name to Sheen because of Fulton Sheen. I think that's true. Dr. Peter Howard joining us. A few minutes remaining. If you have a question, 877-757-9424. Archbishop Fulton Sheen will be beatified in Peoria, Illinois on December 21st. Very exciting. And Dr. Peter Howard also is available to visit parishes and dioceses or your group and speak, and we'll tell you more about that in just a moment, how you can invite him. And one of the talks that Dr. Howard gives is called Life is Still Worth Living. And I'm reading the little information on this, and it says Dr. Howard dives deeply into Sheen's thought, reflecting on the current cultural chaos affecting the family, individuals, and the church. We've talked a lot about this earlier in the show today. What would what would Archbishop Fulton Sheen say today about the chaos in the world and the church if he had a radio program? And we'd love to have him on the Guadalupe Radio Network if he wanted a show. But what would you say about that, Dr. Howard?
Well, I think he would say what he said back in the 1930s and 40s. If you look at what he said back then, during the Second World War and afterward, he basically kept saying it's a very simple answer to, or I could say a very simple analysis of the cause. He says the world is abandoning God, and when you do that, you unhinge everything else: your values, your purpose, even the greatness of a country. Families are going to fall apart, and so put it simply, he's like, your life is going to be worth living. You're going to find a fulfillment and purpose in your life only and only if you have God at the center of that. And so, I mean, it sounds almost like an oversimplistic answer, but that really is what it is. He would say communism, all the things that are threatening us today. We don't use that word in the West that much, but he would say that's exactly what's behind the philosophies of things: attacking the family, attacking the church, attacking, getting God out of things. All of these is because we have really lived unfulfilled Christian values in society.
Dr. Howard, we got about a minute and a half remaining, and I want to cram into that minute and a half. You referred to two weapons that Archbishop Fulton Sheen talks about in growing in holiness, and I wondered if you could tell us those. You may have to do it kind of quickly, and also please let people know how they can book you for coming to their parish or giving a talk. If you can cram all that into a minute and a half, we'd appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve. Well, first, you can easily get me to your parish or event just by going to fultonsheen.institute, and it'll take you right through how to do that. As far as Fulton Sheen's two weapons, very simple. It was our Blessed Mother, bringing her into every conversation, in particular the rosary, something that he took from Fatima, saying that is one of the weapons that is going to be the most powerful in converting a soul. And the other one is going to be his 60-year commitment to making a daily holy hour before our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament. He made that promise the day he was ordained, and he never broke it for 60 years. And he says, if you want power in your preaching, in your counseling, in anything that you do in life, he says, that's where you're going to find it. And so if we want to bring this world back to God, these are two weapons that'll really be a strong catalyst to make that happen.
Awesome. Very good. You got it all in. So thank you so much. Dr. Peter Howard, one of the experts in the world on Archbishop Fulton Sheen. You can email him events@fultonsheen.institute or go to fultonsheen.institute and find out how you can bring him to your parish. And I think in the coming years, we're going to want to learn more and more about this amazing man, Archbishop Fulton Sheen. Dr. Howard, thanks for your time this morning. Great to speak with you.
Thanks, Dave. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much. And that brings us to an end of this Friday edition of GRN Alive. Thanks to Sissel and Diane and Daniel and Dr. Chris and everybody who was part of this show. Don't forget, Joe and the crew will be on Monday morning, 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern with GRN Alive Monday edition.
And happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. And we'll have our Thanksgiving day after show next Friday. Have a great weekend. God bless you.
Thank you for listening to GRN Alive.
From the studios of the Guadalupe Radio Network.
For more faith, fun, and facts,
join our email list.
Just text the letters GRN to the number 42828. That's GRN to the number 42828.
And may your Friday be filled with the joy of the Lord.